3, 2, 1. Cool. Hi, Terrence. Can you hear me?
How's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a little stuttery, but I can hear you. Don't know how
Well,
normal that is on this.
hopefully it clears. It's probably my internet because the internet where I am right now is a little weak. So, all right. So I guess this is the open one where we just talk back and forth. So I'll go ahead and start. First, this debate is about. It's titled "The Theory of Evolution Cannot Explain the Current State of Life on Earth." Basically, what I'm going to propose is that while some people may like to, some atheists who run away from anything having to do with creation or God, evolution has just as many holes in it as does creation. So my first point is first starting off by saying that science cannot prove any historical events took place. We can only look at the evidence and say which scenario fits best based off the evidence. This is how we come up with the theories of evolution and for creation. Creation being that there was a God who created everything, and evolution, which is our solar system and everything in it, was just not created by a God. Okay, so in regards to creation, the evolutionary theory goes something like there was a solar nebula model about 4.6 billion years ago. There was a swirling cloud of gas and dust. The cloud of gas collapsed and started to swirl. Most of the gas went to the middle, became the sun. Then around the outside, so you have dust sticking together to be clumps, clumps sticking together to be rocks, rocks sticking together to become bigger rocks are planetesimals or asteroids. These asteroids became planets. But the thing about that, just that whole thing right there, in science, and there has tried to be creation. Recreating that same thing right there. So it is scientifically proven. Yeah, you put dust together and dust will form. And just the same way I just explained it, you can go all the way up to probably little rocks. However, once you go from little rocks, it is impossible for little rocks to go into bigger rocks. So just right there, starting out right there, going to the creation of the planets. Now, we know anytime you can see a mountain, you know a mountain can be hit by something and break off and little rocks can come from that. However, just thinking about this, just in a rational way, that little rocks or dust would come together and just keep clumping together. And like, when was the last time some rocks just came together like that? It's utterly impossible. And so just even that right there, that is one thing that evolutionary science cannot recreate and cannot prove, that it is possible to go from dust to planets. So, and after that, I'll go ahead and pass it to you.
Okay. Well, the first thing I'd say is that evolution doesn't really concern itself with abiogenesis, which is the creation of life from non-life. Evolution only explains the process by which existing life transforms and changes over time in reaction to its environment in order to create differentiation between species and to create new forms of life over time. So, you know, the cosmic dust and the primordial soup, that's all pre-evolution as far as science is concerned. And those are separate disciplines, separate questions with separate lines of evidence. The only thing that evolution sets out to explain is how we go from having a very small number of simple organisms, well, really a very large number, but you know, ideally the thought is that at some point there were only a few, how we go from that to the life that we have on the planet today. And to look back both at the current, the way that we arrive at these conclusions is to look at life that we have today, examine the properties that it has, also to look at the fossil record that we've discovered over time and what we've learned about it, and to try and come up with what's called a best fit explanation for what it is that we observe. Now, in science, of course, science is an empirical process, so it relies upon empiricism and empirical methods. Science isn't really able to ask questions of the metaphysical or supernatural. It only allows us to look at things that we see around us, make observations about those, develop a hypothesis to explain those observations, and then create tests in order to test whether or not those hypotheses prove out under controlled conditions. So that's the process of science. Science can't really talk about whether there is or isn't a God, or whether evolution is a process designed by a creator or that happens because of the natural laws of the universe without a sense of intelligent guidance. So I would just say, it's important that we limit the discussion to just evolution itself, which happens after the creation of life and is about the changing of life over time. To do that, I would take a look at a few observable facts about life on Earth as it exists today. Life is abundant and diverse. There's all kinds of it, so we know it comes in many varieties. Living creatures are well adapted to the environments in which they survive. You don't see desert-adapted animals in the middle of the Arctic, that sort of thing. So animals only live in the places where the traits of those animals allow them to survive and thrive. Genetic mutation is common. We see variants in animals within species and within individuals over time. So we can see that new genetic information is added in the process of reproduction and in other kinds of mutation that happen. Species that fail to adapt to changing environment die out, which is one of the principles of the mechanism of selection and evolution. So that's something we can observe today. We can see that the DNA of living organisms today, now that we have the technology to actually look inside our cells, we can see that those cells have instructions and information from other species of animals that are not expressed in other animals today. So you could take a fish, for instance, and it would have inside it DNA that came from other kinds of fish or simpler organisms that isn't used by the fish in the current date, but points to it at some point in the past being part of the active genome for the animals. Also, many animals show vestigial forms and remnants of older adaptations. So if you look at birds, for instance, they have the genetic capability of having scales all over their body. They have the genetic capability of having teeth inside of their beak, other things like that from prior creatures that those birds evolved from over time, because the way evolution works from a genetic standpoint, it's a big stack. You build on, you add and add and add. Sometimes pieces fall off or they degrade, but it changes over time. And so we observe that animals have these remnant features, and that's easily explained by the process of evolution building up over time in these creatures. When we look at the fossil record, we see that we have a very long history of life on Earth, around 4 billion years. It shows a general pattern from simpler organisms in an older time period to more complicated organisms today. The closer you get in the fossil record to the present, you have organisms that are closer to those that are alive in the present. The further back you go in time in the fossil record, you have creatures that are further different than the animals that are alive today. And throughout the entire 4 billion year history, you have periods where animals exist that never existed before, going all the way back to the beginning. Furthermore, we find a number of transition animals wherein you can see that those animals of an older epoch had some trait or feature, which in the animals of the next epoch has changed subtly and in different ways. Maybe a hand starts to become a wing, or a fin becomes a hand. Things start to transition from one form to another over time. So observing all these differences, we came up with a theory. How does this happen? And originally Darwin looked at these animals at very different isolated islands and said, well, perhaps they all started out the same or similar to other populations, but then in isolation, in a different environment, the effect of selective pressure, the needs of survival changed. And so those traits in the animals that were expressed and are always kind of jumbling around that were best suited to that environment became dominant. Once we discovered DNA and we were able to really look inside the mechanisms of life, we started to see the mechanisms under which these things can actually happen, which is strong support for the evidence of evolution. Whenever you have a theory that then says, well, we understand what evolution is, we don't know exactly how the organisms change. But then as time goes on, as we investigate, we discover facts about the way our biology works, and we go, well, there's a mechanism that lines up great with the way the evolutionary process works. So that's my my matchup, my best fit of evolutionary development to the things that we observe is my abductive case for why evolution is a perfectly reasonable explanation for how we get the life that we see on Earth.
Okay, you just hit a bunch a large spectrum of a whole bunch of stuff, which is awesome.
Sure. Well, we can pick a
however,
few and talk about it.
The one thing that I kind of had a problem with was just how yeah. Okay, so you started out with, and you basically said, and I don't want to quote you wrong, but it was basically the evolution starts like after life, correct? Is that about what you said?
That's right. It starts after the creation of initial life. It does not address how life begins.
Was that about what you said? The evolution starts after life already?
That's right.
Okay. And I kind of disagree with that a little bit, but I'll tell you why I disagree with it a little bit, because it's kind of leapfrogging or jumping forward. It's easy to say that evolution is provable when you don't have to start out at the beginning. It's basically you're already starting out past the beginning, because if you have to start at life itself, and I guess I think that's kind of weird, because yes, we do know as far as evolution goes that no science whatsoever can prove exactly where life started at, and that's because there have been evolutionists that try to prove basically, and they failed to. Going back as far as I think it was Louis Pasteur that tried to get life from non-life and couldn't get it. But okay, so
research in that area continues.
Like I said, it's kind of hard to start from life already being on Earth to start from evolution, because I kind of started at life, and it's like, the best way for yes that is very true. So if you brought up DNA and building blocks and stuff like that, so let's start out at human life. Okay, so you have a sperm, and you have the sperm inside the scrotum, and the sperm has 23 chromosomes, which is exactly the half the amount you need, which is the 46 for human life. Okay, so you have that. Then you have the sperm. You have the testosterone coming from the brain, feeding down through the male body, that is providing the testosterone for the creation of sperm. You have the sperm inside the sac. That is this sac that completely keeps it away from blood, because while the sperm is being developed, it can't come into contact with blood. And at the very last part, the sperm is being my mind went blank. Oh, as it's being developed, it comes up with the capability, the enzyme that needs to be able to break into the female egg. So, in talking about building blocks, when you have all this stuff, and when we talk about evolution, evolution takes a lot of liberties, as in they skip a whole bunch of stuff. And to me, it's basically like anything that creates a problem with evolution, it kind of gets jumped. It's like, okay, this is not really working out right now with how the planets were created and how everything came, so we're going to start here. We can't really explain how life started, so we're going to start here. And you continue to move the goalposts forward. But just looking at human recreation, any one of these things, when you look at how just the sperm meeting with the egg and going inside the egg, if any one of those things did not happen the way that it happened, there would be death. The human species would not have been able to go forward. So you can't say that this starting out from, like I said, the very conception of human life, it's kind of hard to say that there was any kind of evolution having to do with this at all. It's the same thing with the human heart, the lungs, and the brain. As far as, okay, if creation is evolving and it's starting from just a single cell, some kind of single cell species, all right, as it's evolving, you know what? I'm gonna take this one at a time. I'm gonna stick the first time this is probably ever been said in the QallOut Debate. I'm gonna stick with the sperm for right now.
All right. Well, let me say a couple things before I get into the sperms. I mean, the technical definition of evolution, if you talk to a scientist, right, or if you go look it up in a dictionary, I've got it here. The process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from early forms during the history of the Earth. So if you talk about evolution, that's that. If you want to talk about science and empiricism on a broader spectrum, that's kind of a broader argument. It's a bigger topic, right? So I came for evolution specifically, right? So using the definition, that's where I am. So that's where I'm prepared. But I can go off script a little bit. But let's talk a little bit about the sperm. A lot of the time, one of the common critiques of evolution is something called irreducible complexity. And that's the idea that, my brain or my eyeball or, my sperm, whatever it is, so incredibly complex. How can we imagine that something like that develops over time without sort of a master blueprint from an intelligent process? Now, keep in mind, people who believe in evolution don't necessarily say that evolution wasn't created by God. We make machines and we set them in motion and they roll off and they do their own thing without any further intervention from us. If a mind is sufficiently incredible, it could come up with a system that is self-actuating, that could do the things that life did. And we know that such a system exists. We observe life. So this system is there. There's no arguing about that. The question is, how did it get there, or how does it work, right? And evolution is really about how does it work, not how did it get there. But we'll talk a little bit about that with irreducible complexity. So the thing is you've got 4 billion years. This is an immense, unbelievable amount of time. And you've also got a number of organisms on planet Earth that are in the trillions and trillions and trillions. All of them are constantly living and doing things, experimenting with the way life works. I mean, think about all the billions and billions of people and all the incredible things that we invent. If there was just one of us, we couldn't do all that, right? But because there are billions of us, we can do so many different things all at the same time. And the power of the collective action of all these things interacting together creates a system of incredible complexity and incredible diversity. And that's what we see in life. Once you get a single organism that can reproduce and it splits off, bloop, 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 double, 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 double. Soon you're talking trillions and trillions of organisms, all experiencing different parts of the planet, different parts of life, different environments that are going to say, hey, you know what, your little oblong shaped thing, you do pretty well over in this part of the ocean. And you little circular thing, you do pretty well in this part of the ocean. And then the oblong things start to change. And you get a more and more ever increasing set of diversity. And the rules of life work like this. Generally speaking, if you look at the way DNA works, like our sperm and our eggs, for the most part, they get it right every time. They come together, cha-ching, it all works kind of according to plan, and you get a normal outcome, right? But it doesn't always work. We know that. There's all kinds of defects, all kinds of changes that can happen, all kinds of variations in the way the chromosomes get up. Sometimes you get double Y chromosomes and you get somebody can still live. Sometimes you get double X and they still live. Normally you want an XY, right? But there are variations that happen all the time because the mechanisms are not perfect. That imperfection allows change in diversity. That change in diversity is then judged essentially by the environment in which the organisms live. If the environment doesn't like what that change that happened, the organisms die out and they don't reproduce. If, however, a new change tends to be better than what's already around, or maybe not better in that environment, but fits into an environment that isn't exploited yet, then suddenly you get a new population that grows and prospers, and the environment encourages that kind of diversity. So over the course of the Earth is constantly changing. Sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's filled with sulfuric acid, sometimes it's got lots of oxygen, sometimes it doesn't have very much oxygen. Life always survives no matter what changes, not because it's designed to deal with any one situation, but because it can adapt to new and changing situations all the time. And the only way it can do that is to change. So any organism, any system of life that is going to survive on a changing planet over 4 billion years has to have a mechanism by which it can become something different. That process is what we call evolution. Anything that didn't change will die. Life could not survive if it did not have the ability to evolve. So, we should get back to the sperm. So, 4 billion years of constant change, constant trial and error will create some pretty darn incredible outcomes and amazing situations through incremental processes over, again, many billions of years, right? I mean, we can't even really imagine this kind of scale because we've only been around, human beings, according to the fossil record, for, I don't know, 50, 60, 100 million maybe. Very short period of time. So 4 billion is a lot of time for all kinds of crazy stuff to go down and all kinds of really brilliant, amazing, to us, almost incomprehensible, but we're getting close, stuff to happen. Any other kind of life that couldn't adapt and change like we are would be gone. I'll leave it at that. Oh, hold on. I'm not hearing what you're saying then.
Okay, so let me say this. I didn't say this earlier, but let me say this. Just so you understand this, I am a younger creationist.
Okay. Well, that's a whole nother wax, though.
Okay, I say all this, in case I didn't say this up front, that I'm a younger creationist. So basically, everything you just said just now about billions and billions of years, that was like nails on a chalkboard to me right there.
That's truth, man.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so just going off evolution. So we talked about the fossil record a little bit, and what I wanted to talk about what I wanted to talk about with the fossil record is this. So yes, there are many species in the fossil record, and yes, you can see, like, looking at the fossil record, you can see the evolution of, like, from small neck giraffes to bigger neck giraffes and stuff like that. However, what the fossil record does not show is interspecies evolution, as in I'm not going to go to the micro versus macro evolution. I'll just say that in the fossil record that there's no, like, a fish changing into a bird, changing into a hippopotamus, and a hippopotamus into a giraffe. Those
You're wrong about
right
that.
there are not in. There's no interspecies evolution in the inside the fossil record. That's yet another leap that evolutionists have kind of just phoned that one in. Like I said, when I'm saying that evolution cannot explain the current state of Earth, is because, like I said, there's so many holes. Come on, there is no species to species evolution. There's internal species, like there's evolution from humans, and humans this and this and this, giraffes to long neck giraffes. Yes, but as far as going over, you can say that we share some of the same DNA as a whole bunch of other species. That's perfectly fine. But to say that the fossil record shows that there's any kind of evolution from species to species, that is inaccurate itself. Not to mention, when you're looking at, you'll have to show me. You will have to show me that one. But, and I was gonna say, and then when you're looking at DNA strands are basically locked. There's no way to add on to DNA. So that's yet another leap that evolution takes, because yes, you can have, like, say there are 64 strands in human DNA. I'm sorry, 46
chromosomes.
I hate when my mind goes
Some
blank.
people have more than that.
46 chromosomes in human DNA. And yes, you can change those 46 around, and you can change the stuff around, but it's always going to remain the same amount. And that's
not true, sir.
Human to human.
There are
to
people
human
with
to
more
human.
than 46 chromosomes who are alive today.
Just the DNA strands and the amount of DNA that it has, you can't add to it. I was talking about chromosomes, but I'm going back to just DNA, not chromosomes. But when you're looking at DNA strands, there's no way to add to. Am I screaming? There's no way. Yes, which is why I backtracked and took it away from chromosomes and just said DNA strands, the amount of human DNA. And I can look that up. But to say that DNA, there's no evidence as far as DNA goes that there was evolution. There's a certain amount of DNA that any one organism has that never changes, and that is unobservable by science. So that's one. Like I said,
that's not true, sir. There are organisms that
of evolution
change DNA
within a species. Within humans do evolve. Yes. Within apes do evolve. Yes. But as far as starting out from life, let's say the first species to the multiple species that we have on the Earth, that is unobservable.
It doesn't matter if it's unobservable. Evolution is an
back to you.
explanation for what we observe in the fossil record. We don't have to see it happen in order to make a hypothesis about how it happened.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was it. Within a species, though, what I'm saying is, yes, within a species, as in human DNA.
We don't have sufficient time to watch a species develop far enough in order to become another species. That's the problem.
Yes, but okay,
it
so
takes a very long time for that level of differentiation, because each small change.
That is so weird. Like I've had a few debates on basically on creation and evolution. This is probably the third one I've had. But
the thing is, we have transitionary species alive today. There are fish that can breathe air because they have lungs inside of them. They're called lungfish, by the way.
That's one of the main things.
There are also platypus, who are mammals that lay eggs.
Like I was saying at the beginning.
There is no fine dividing line. A big problem with the whole idea of microevolution, they say, fine, well, humans can evolve, apes can evolve, these guys can evolve, but one can't change into the other.
And that's about probably
why? Give me one reason why they can't do it. Why can we change within a species, but we can't change across species? You've got no underlying mechanism that restricts it. Given enough time, anything is possible.
Yeah, but that's a lot of the statements. It seems like almost like for an evolutionist, you feel like you can't be boxed down to giving a decisive answer. It's like anything is possible, and that is so weird, because you never have to come up with a full explanation on anything. You just have to give a hypothesis, and you can.
Well, that's how science works, though. Science is a process of observing, creating hypothesis, and testing hypothesis. It's not a process by which scientists sit down and they go, I now know everything there is to know. It doesn't work like that. They study, they research, they explore, they try to discover new information. We're always discovering new things through that process. But it is a disciplined process, and it's a process where we don't accept any idea unless it gets results, unless we can test it and show that it happens. And we have plenty of evidence looking at the way organisms work in alive today and in the fossil record that shows us there is a process of life that changes. I showed you, and you haven't rebutted it, that life that cannot change sufficiently will die over the course of time. Only an evolving system of life can survive on this planet. A system that is static, where nobody ever changes, is doomed to failure. We'd all have been gone by now.
And I 100% agree with you. And the reason why I didn't rebut that is because I completely agree with that, which is why you have, and once again, I'll say interspecies evolution. Why you have evolution as far as like short-necked giraffes going to long-necked giraffes and stuff like that. Yes.
Yeah, but a shorter long neck isn't enough to survive, cataclysmic environmental changes. You got to have the ability to go a long way. For billions of years, there was no life on land. All the life was in the oceans. And then there was life on land. How did we get apes and tigers and people and trees if they couldn't evolve from something that didn't live on land?
That is a question for an evolutionist, but as a creationist, I would give you a different answer than that.
Okay.
My answer is short and sweet and to the point. And that, like I said, that is it's kind of like the circle. You need this. Like there's no. Okay, how do I say this right? Okay, so when we're talking about the fossil record once again, and like I said, there's no evidence. And if please, because we have 16 minutes left, if for all the evidence that you say there is, as far as in the fossil record going from one species to another species,
I could give you a long list of them.
Okay, even when you're talking about fish that are breathing air, yet that's still a fish. Now, you brought up the platypus.
It is both a fish and it is not a fish. It has some of the traits of fish, and it has some traits of things that are not fish traditionally. It defies the usual rules and categories. It's a fish with lungs. Most fish don't have lungs. You know how we got lungs, land creatures? fish develop them so that they can come out on the land and take advantage of the resources. That lungfish is an example of that process. It's not just a fossil, it's a living creature that is a transitionary creature between those forms of life.
That right there, and I'll give credit to the fact that when we're talking about internal to a species, when you're saying that and something must adapt to in order to survive. Yes. So when you're looking at that fish right there, maybe that fish is in an environment, and those fish have lived in an environment where humans have been there and polluted the water. So yes, or something like that. But
and the thing is, they could keep evolving. They could get longer legs, and then they could start running around on trees. Pretty soon, they don't go back into the water at all. They develop thicker skin. Maybe they start to leap off the tree. Maybe the environment is such that one of them gets webs between its feet, and then it can glide down, and that guy can hunt better, and so that you get more gliding fish lizard things. And then over time, they change. More and more different, modifications happen. We've got creatures that do so many different things in the world, and that's exactly because they've changed to use all these advantages that they developed through the process of biological change. And there's no wall. There's no a fish can't ever become a squirrel. There's nothing that would stop it. I mean, nobody who talks about microevolution ever has any real qualification for where the line is between this species and that species. Only scientists have that, and they have it because they look at the genetic material and they look at the morphology of the creatures to determine what traits they have that came from earlier ancestors that they have in common.
Hold on, I'm looking up something. I'm looking up something. I don't want to kill this last 13 minutes and 40 seconds. So let me tab the answer a little bit. So where are you from?
I am originally I was born in Alaska. I lived in Seattle, Washington for quite a while. Currently, I travel around the country in my Airstream trailer, which you can kind of see behind me. And got our website, Trail and Hitch, if anyone wants to check it out. We write about our travels. So I've been on the road for about 20 months now. Just seeing America. We just finished up with Washington, D.C. We're down in Virginia now. Let's see, I'm a software developer by trade originally, but I'm a writer right now. I'm kind of bumming around the country, doing fun stuff like this.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm back now, and what I wanted to hurry up and look up right quick is just to dive into a little bit more about DNA. And you asked,
sure.
What is the thing that keeps one species from going to another one that creationists can't say?
Okay.
And for an answer, I'll say that is the amount of DNA that any one species had, because as I said before, the amount of over 25,000 human genomes, way over 25,000. That's how much DNA a human has. A fish has far less than that. As I was saying before, yes, the amount of
tree
DNA
has far more.
is able to change inside that species. But as far as adding more DNA to that is science has not been able to do it. It is unprovable. It is unobservable. That is absolutely correct. So, but like I said, I did see that trees have more DNA. So you're absolutely correct. So trees have this much DNA, humans have this much DNA, and say a fish has this much DNA. The problem with that is that's locking it from one to go to another is that fish can never have more DNA than it has right now. And like I said, that's
not true.
Unprovable. It is only just in order for evolution to be a very valid hypothesis, we're going to say that yes, in some kind of way that. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was saying it's not true.
Go ahead.
Let's see. Here, I'm going to read from an article on ancient humans had more DNA than we have now from Gizmodo. That's exactly what the authors of the new study did. By sequencing the genomes of 236 individuals from 125 distinct populations, the results showed that the ancestors shed about 15.8 million pairs of DNA before leaving Africa. As populations spread across the Earth's continent, they jettisoned additional chunks of DNA here and there. But certain populations have also been gaining DNA, mostly through duplication events where portions of the genetic code were accidentally copied and passed on. Does the net loss of DNA over time over matter? We'll go on. But the point is that human populations gain and lose DNA. both in the variety of pairs of active chromosomes or active. I forget what they're called now. The bits that do the action and create the proteins that create life. The number we have, the variety of them we have, ebbs and flows. We gain new ones and we lose old ones. That's the way life works. It's constantly changing. This theory that we're the same and we always have exactly this amount of this stuff never changes. It's not true. The science tells us it isn't, because we've sequenced the DNA of existing populations in different parts of the world, and we've sequenced the DNA of human remains that we find. We find that they gain and lose genetic diversity over time.
Okay, so we're almost at an impasse because I have never seen, nor have I ever found any evidence of any kind of way that human DNA has been added to. Like I said, in order to go from and I keep using fish, I'm sorry, but in order to go from a fish to a whatever comes next in evolution, let's give it something small, let's say a dog. In order to go from a fish to a dog has more DNA than a fish. Now, there's no way that I've seen, and I just looked this up again just to make sure I wasn't completely off. There's no way to add to a DNA strand, and that's, like I said, that is one of the biggest fallacies.
It's not true
in evolution.
Where did you get that information from? Please don't say answer
I'll
to
have
Genesis.
To post it
because those guys are full of crap.
No.
All right.
No, not Answers in Genesis. I actually did not get anything from Answers in Genesis for this whole debate. But
that's good.
All right. So listen. We have about 8 minutes left. I don't know what kind of closing comments you want to have, but I'll go into just some. Let me say this. Just let me make sure I hit everything that I wanted to hit.
Yeah, go for it, man.
All right. So when we're talking about evolution, and we're talking about evolution from, because you said it always started from after life has already started. Like I said, I have a problem with that, because you're already taking liberty to say life is already here in some kind of way, and that's not possible. So when you're talking about the fossil record and stuff like that in transitionary species, yes, there are transitionary species, but you're talking about transitionary species inside a species. You're not talking about like the amount for it to go from a single cell, whatever, amoeba or whatever, to all the multiple cell, including trees, including all the different kind of animals that we have right now. It would take more than billions. If that was true, it would take almost like trillions of years to get all the amount of evolution that it would take, and change and trial and error that it would take to get to where humans are today. It would take a lot longer than billions of years. It would take trillions of years. So if dude, I'm not making it. I will, like I said, all my links I will post after this, so people don't think I'm just pulling up stuff from the top of my head. Because, like I said, you're looking at, when you're talking about this, you have to look at the amount of trial and error that it would take. The amount of trial and error it would take just for, when you're talking about, when I was talking earlier about the sperm and the wall inside the scrotum and stuff like that. You're talking about like millions of years for each one of those subtle changes just within the human. That's not even talking about across the species. So, like I said, but when you talk evolution with an evolutionary person, it's like leaps. Like, it's almost like, you know what? It took only 1,000 years for this to go to this, and that's how it fits in 1 billion years. But look, when you're talking about the fish that can breathe, the amount of evolution that it will take to get to where we are today cannot be explained just by survival of the fittest. No, it would take a lot more time than that. And like I said, I'll post that. And like I said, as as of like right now, which is 2012 or 812 Central Standard Time, I have never seen any kind of evidence of adding to DNA for smaller creatures to bigger creatures. I've never seen any kind of evidence of interspecies, what we would call macroevolution, being from one species to another species. And all that has to do, not to mention the fact that when you're talking evolution, you have to start from somewhere. You have to start from somewhere. You can't just start from life is already there and then it started evolving, because it has to start somewhere. Okay, with that being said, there's about 5 minutes left. I'll let you go, and hopefully we both get a last little minute.
All right. Well, from a technical debate standpoint, let me say we came here to debate evolution. The definition of evolution is the process of change of life. Yeah, no problem. So that's what the debate is about. Whether you want to go before that, well, that's nice for you. It's kind of like showing up to an algebra debate and wanting to talk about arithmetic.
Siegfried, your turn.
Yeah, I got you. I'm going. I guess you can't see me. Yeah, that's what evolution is. We got a debate on the topic, right, man? We can talk about other things at another time. But here's the deal. I think there's a lack of imagination going on, man. Look, 4 billion years with trillions and trillions and trillions of cells, huge amount, all acting all at the same time. Every single millisecond, chemical reactions are happening in every single cell of every living organism on Earth all the time at every moment over the course of 4 billion years. It's not just like 1 year and maybe there's a piece of evolution happening here, maybe there's a piece there. It's constant over the entire living population, the entire time of the planet. If we did not have a system of evolution in which we could change from species to species in any way that is necessary to match our environment, we wouldn't have anybody alive on the planet today. No you, no me, no fish, no birds, no single-celled organisms, no bacteria, no nothing. We see evolution in species all the time in the current world. And when we look back at the fossil record, which is very well verified with carbon-14 dating and many other dating techniques that are well proven by science, we have a long, long history of life changing. And it went from no animals, no plants, no trees, no fish, no nothing, just little single-celled organisms that leave little teeny, teeny, teeny marks in the stone for billions and billions of years, up into the first multi-celled creatures after many billions start to crawl around in the oceans. Then they start to crawl around on land, and on it goes as evolution develops. And it is amazing, amazing system. Just because we don't understand everything about how it works, that doesn't mean it isn't true. The process of science is to look at the available evidence, create the best explanation possible for what we see, and as we see new evidence, we adjust our ideas in order to fit. Evolution has stood the test of time since when Charles Darwin came up with the idea, and every single new discovery we make in the realm of biological science has supported evolution and is consistent with its processes. We've had to make some adjustments here and there. Sometimes people think only the fittest survive. Well, it doesn't always work that way, because if you've got a little niche, you can be kind of unfit and you can still make your way around. You can still hook up. You can still make babies. So you don't have to be the fittest to survive. You just got to be fit enough. And that's how the process works, my friend. It's been a pleasure debating with you. I got a minute or so, but I think I'm happy to leave it at that. Let the audience decide who they think made the more persuasive case. And look up those transitory species if you don't believe it. Type in transition species or transitory species. You will find a lot of them.
Before we go, let me say one more thing. Okay, let me say this. First, that when we didn't talk about when we were talking about the fossil record was the Precambrian explosion, which was at the Cambrian layer of the Earth's strata. That there were a few animals here, then also at the Cambrian level, bam, multiple animals. Then when you said carbon-14 dating, carbon-14 cannot stay inside of a fossil for billions and billions and billions of years.
That's true.
Carbon dating is one of the most unreliable ways to date something. Yet some scientists, they still hold on to that. It is impossible for carbons to stay inside of anything for billions of years.
It's not used to measure billions of years. It's used to measure much more recent dates.
Okay.
Radiometric dating.
I gotta keep going back.
But they're all based on a similar principle of radioactive decay.
Hey, I want to let you know that for your first debate.
Well, thanks, man. I can't quite hear it, but I appreciate you giving me a shot.
But